Welcome. My name is Karen Jones, and I represent the Growmark system of cooperatives. Growmark's mission is to improve the long-term profitability of our member owners. We've been doing that for nearly 100 years. We provide almost everything farmers need for their operations, from seed, fertilizer, and crop protection products to fuel, propane, and lubricants, and grain marketing solutions. Growmark is a proud sponsor of the Ag Summit, and I'm especially excited to introduce this session. Reid and Heather Thompson are a young farm family who have navigated the twists and turns of agriculture by introducing innovative ways to make room for themselves within their existing family farm operation. They'll share how they found extra margin, brought in extra income, and used strategic and succession planning to help carve out a place not only for them, but also for their two boys, should they choose to farm someday. I have the pleasure of working with Heather in her off-farm role at Growmark, and I know the session will be worthwhile. Join me in listening to Reid and Heather Thompson, Coming Home When the House is Already Full.
Good afternoon. My name is Reid Thompson, from a farmer from Central Illinois. And today the topic that we're going to kind of go through is kind of my journey home to the farm and kind of what that has looked like and some of the challenges and some unique things that we have done to one, improve our margins, but also find ways to offset the cost of me coming home to the farm. As we all know, there's only a finite amount of dollars, and making a room for yourself when dad's not ready to retire is probably an age-old problem or opportunity, challenge, however you want to say it. And so this is kind of that story. And so a little in Colfax, Illinois. We farm around 3,400 acres, corn and soybeans. A mixture of our enterprises is not just commercial, but also venture into seed soybean production, which we will get about 100 acres a year of seed corn for Bayer. And actually all of our seed soybeans are also with Bayer. And again, a little more on that and kind of how we've partnered with them. Our cultural practices on the farm have primarily been focused around the more of the regenerative ag type annotations and really more of that conservation tillage. So all of our soybeans are no-tilled. We have moved into the strip till world, not necessarily banding fertilizer, but more of the practice of building berms, getting a deeper tillage without moving 100% of the residue. So more of a conservation tillage. And in 2021 will be our second year into a larger percentage of our acres in cover crops. We farm in the eastern half of McLean County and get into the western part of Ford County. And right now the operation is consisted of, and I probably should have started, the picture you see there is mom and dad on the left with our two boys, and then Heather and I, and then the two boys are Abe is the older one and Hank's the ornery one, and he's only 2. So a little bit about the timeline of how I guess I became a full-time farmer. So I graduated from the University of Illinois in 2010. Was in the ag economics major. And at that time, I wanted to farm, but at the same time, I knew in the back of my head that the dollars were not going to be there to support, I guess, as a new college graduate, the dollars that I anticipated to be able to make, as well as had offers for. The farm was not going to be able to match that, nor were we at the size where dad was willing to start handing over acres and things of that nature. So we had a conversation about it, and he kind of looked at me like, they're going to pay you how much? Which was fun at the time, but it was also like, well, yeah, don't you think I'm worth that? And so at the same time, it was good because it forced me into I guess it reaffirmed what I already knew, that the farm was only so big. There's only so many dollars to pay for labor. And, you know, if I have an opportunity to go make more money and learn, the farm's not going anywhere. So in 2010, I accepted a position with Hertz Farm Management as a professional farm manager and real estate broker. Also served as a company's auctioneer in Illinois for about 10 years. And that was probably the one biggest thing I would tell anybody that is even thinking about coming home to farm, whether you have an opportunity or you don't, go work for somebody else. Because the one thing I learned is that dad's way, grandpa's way is not the only way. Contrary to popular belief, when you're on the farm, there are other ways to do it. There are other ways to skin a cat, so to speak. And so through the initial first 5 years of my professional career, I got into a management role much earlier on than I would say others that I know that decided to go home and farm. And through that, I learned negotiating, I learned input purchasing, I learned leasing, buying, selling land. I learned how to identify good characteristics and potential tenants. What would a landowner look at for whether that's cultural practices, whether that's lease terms, et cetera. Learn how to deal with that relationship, which as we move forward is really going to be a basis of, kind of some of our success early on, at least as my venturing back into the farm full-time farming. So as you see on the timeline, we start in 10, we jump ahead to 2015. As my profession was buying and selling farms, I had a bug to own my own. It's just something I think a generational, genetic, so to speak, desire. I wanted a farm. I wanted my own farm, and we were fortunate in 2015. We had a family member that was willing to sell a farm to help and trade into another property, and that's what got us started. In 2015, we bought a farm in May, and I got to be the farmer that fall, and that was, I guess, a dream come true. And so we were lucky in that vantage point that we didn't have a lot of money to put towards it, but we had family that helped us, and that really kind of just started the snowball. Because in fall of 2015 into 2016, Heather and I, along with my dad, Gerald, and mom, we were able to rent a couple farms. So we went from 0 acres to renting about 550 acres in our first year. In 2016, we also decided to add a second planter. So not only did I have hardly any money to get started, it was, why don't you buy a second planter for the farm? Because that'd be a good idea. And then in 2016, we also started direct sourcing our UAN. And I'll get into some more specifics of each of these events after we get through the timeline here, and kind of why these were important steps in our process. In 2017, my wife's grandmother, who had been operating her own farm, decided she wanted to sell a piece of it, and also repair bills were starting to get high. So Heather and I decided to buy the field she was wanting to sell. In exchange, we also started farming for the family, which was an opportunity for us to grow our ownership share, as that 350 acres of new rented land was actually 100% us versus being split 50-50 with my father. In 18, we had the same growth pattern. We had about 40% growth from 2015 to 2020. We also had our hired man informed us that he would be done at the end of 18. And so that was another step in kind of my return. We also decided to go from several tractors and consolidated equipment down to 2 tractors, which doesn't seem logical. As you look at a growth pattern of 40%, you went and sold 30% of your tractors. And so that's something that, because of the conservation tillage and the manpower that we had, it wasn't doing anything. It was sitting half the time. And so after our hired man left, and as we approached 2019, I decided that, we went through the job hunt for an employee, and we just couldn't find the person we were looking for and kind of what met the long-term goals of how we wanted to handle the business going forward. And so I was at a point where I was pretty much ready to start farming at any point. All somebody had to do was give me the green light. I got the green light, informed Hertz that I would be leaving in the spring. and returned home. 2019 was a fun year. Not only did we have full trade war payments, trade war price issues, we had a lower production year. We then decided to get into wholesale chemistry, buy another combine, and built our own nitrogen storage facility. And again, more on that in a little bit. And then fast forward to 20 is kind of where we're at and kind of how we managed over the last year to 2 years of me being home full time. And that's kind of the timeline we've worked on of the return. Again, there's about 3 points in our within this timeline that I really want to focus on. Okay, so the first area we would like to, or I guess we're going to talk about is really kind of how we moved into, I'm calling it pricing and sourcing, but really buying direct and then storing it on site. And so one of the things in 2016, we purchased Y drops. So we were able to do some late season nitrogen. And one of the keys of that is you don't need nitrogen in March, but you need it in July. Which provides an interesting pricing opportunity, as typically that would be a point where the majority of nitrogen has been purchased and is no longer, the demand is a lot lower. And so there are retailers are at a point where we can buy it a little bit cheaper. In addition, because of the timing, we had the opportunity to go get it. And so when we were buying it direct off the river rather than picking it up at our local retailer. By doing so, we were able to save probably about anywhere from a third to 25% of our total nitrogen cost. In year one, it was greater than $100 a ton. And now 2016, we didn't really have the margin crunch that we have seen in 2019 and 20. But when you start taking 25% of your nitrogen cost out every year for the last 5 years, it's really provided an opportunity for better cash flow and or just net profit. In addition to something we started doing before 2016 is I started getting involved in the pricing of our seed, which was an interesting dynamic because, we weren't a big farm, but some of my customers and tenants that I dealt with at Hertz were 5 to 40,000 acre farmers. And so when I'd start asking them questions about seed purchasing and what were they buying, not just in hybrids, but also what were you paying for that hybrid, both on a full traded package versus the conventional corn. And so we really got into the kind of price shopping, not only our nitrogen, but also our seed purchases. And if you account for those two inputs, they make up a pretty substantial share of our cost every year. And in doing so, we really kind of tried to find where can we make money on applications that we're doing late season information that we have, and how do we profit off of this? And so while I say we were able to save all this money, it wasn't without its challenges. Buying nitrogen direct in July, it has its own problems. One, where are you going to put it? We're an hour from the river on a good day, let alone the time if you have any traffic or road construction between, here in Peoria or LaSalle, Peru. And so the logistics of getting the product and handling it, it's not as simple as it sounds. We were fortunate. We had a neighbor that was nearby that had excess storage. And so we were able to buy it and store it closer to where we needed it. But it was also, it also took time away from other tasks. Cash flow. I mean, we're buying nitrogen. We've already purchased 100% of our 2021 nitrogen, and we did that a month ago. And so all of a sudden, you got to come up with the cash shortly after you go get it. Purchasing seed the way we did changed it from using some financing programs and buying it in January, February to pushing it back into November, December. Buying all of it up front as opposed to landlords that may want to delay. And so it really strained the capital as well as kind of just threw a curveball at our cash flow. Year one wasn't bad. It was probably the worst, actually. But as we've moved into it further, and now we're buying larger volumes as well as at different times. Like I said, storage, you got to have a place to put it. We were fortunate. We had a neighbor that had extra space. In 2019, we actually installed our own facility so that we could haul it and store it whenever we wanted it, as well as pull it and head to the field whenever it was convenient for us. The other problem, which we all have issues with our retailers and and their invoicing systems, because it's never just the way we want it, and it's always just a little bit more confusing than it should be. But now that's something we took on. So while it was a big money saver, we created a whole nother set of tracking and invoicing and management that we didn't have previously. Outside of, okay, we put so many tons on this farm and so many tons here, we now had to track prepays, long-term invoicing, inventories, etc. And so that's one area that I think, we've been able to save a lot of money in really doing it. But the other thing you got to keep in mind is when you start price shopping, what happens if the person says, okay, see ya? Have you really thought through the process of what happens when they call your bluff that you really want another $10 a ton? Do you have another outlet that is going to match your price? And that's one thing you had to get used to, was just because we've done business in the past does not mean it's guaranteed. We probably didn't make friends doing it, but being upfront with everybody and saying we are purchasing a product. We are not expecting anything after that. And so what can you offer the price at to me? And that's probably one of my biggest things is while we have made money, it's not as simple as just saving money. There's a lot more to it. And something you got to be willing to do. And also within this, we've been able to save money, but that doesn't mean there wasn't room to say, I want to go get it direct, but I also need some other services too. So while we saved $100 a ton, you may be willing to accept less if there's additional services provided. We've just chose not to ask for additional services, but rather what's the best price on product. Another area, and this kind of relates back to us getting into the wholesale chemistry, is how have we found margins when times got tough? One of the things as we sat here and talked about it, and why you see hats on the page, is you need to get in the mindset of no more free hats. You're not buying something for a trip. You're not buying it for lunches, and you're not buying it to get a new hat. And I think that is something that has probably been the hardest part because we've been very loyal to our local retailer and sale. Low man wins. And that's, I think, where is one of the hardest things we've had to deal with, but has probably resulted in one of the largest increases in margin that we have seen on anything we've done. And so the one example I'm going to go through is really us moving into the wholesale chemistry market. In 2019, let me back up. In 2018, the end of the year, I had our local agronomist or independent agronomist we work with come, and they were going to take on a wholesale chemistry business. We sat down, we went through it. He said, "What'd you pay last year?" I told him. He said, "I'll guarantee I can cut that by a third." I chuckled because I'm like, "Yeah, okay, me too." And he showed me the numbers, and I about fell out of my chair. And we were just talking pre-emerge, post-emerge applications. We didn't talk about fungicide, insecticide applications. We just looked at our basic application process. And what it amounted to is we're not paying for people. We're not paying for the co-op to stand there and mix my tanks. I'm not paying for advice. I am simply buying a product from one person, and it's being delivered to my shed. And we kind of stewed about it. And we thought, boy, that's taken on a lot. Are we really ready to do that? Fast forward about 60 days, I was now coming home full time, and prices were no good. Margin, you were barely breaking even, if not losing money in 2009, going into 2019. And we had to do something. And unfortunately, the person that we were so loyal to passed away unexpectedly. And so some of that loyalty to the brick and mortar stayed, and we were more tied to the person. And so that just that event plus me coming home to farm just really pushed us into this new adventure. And so one of the things that, we went back, we looked at it, and it was worth the time, the effort, the energy. And the simple answer was yes. We cut our chemistry bill by 40%. What does that mean in terms of dollars? If you look at university studies, they're showing on an average budget basis about $60 an acre. And so we spent 40% less. We were spending closer to $35 to $40. And that included our fungicide and insecticides. And we cheated year one. We didn't make anything special. We took what we did at the co-op in 2017, 2018, and we bought those products and did the same thing in 2019. So we didn't try to set the world on fire our first year. We kept it simple in an effort to say, is this something we really can do? We had great success. I was very pleased. We found some challenges we knew with, coming back and resprays and things of that nature, but it was fairly simple. And we kept it that way because that was intentional. But as you see on the first page under my challenges, this was not 40% back in the bank. Because in year one, we spent roughly about $30,000 to get set up. We had to get a water source, and not just a quality well, but we had to have a place to put a large volume of water so that when it came time to go to the field, we were ready. We didn't have to spend a day pumping water. So there was an investment in infrastructure that really kind of forced us to stop, think, how do we make this very simple? And if it's not simple, it needs to become simple because anyone should be able to walk in and know how to do this. So there was investment in infrastructure. The second bullet point or third bullet point you see there is safety. We put a big emphasis on making sure that I didn't have to touch and open jugs all day long because it's fatigue, that's exposure, and those are things you don't need. Nor do you need to be standing over the inductor dumping jugs with any type of herbicide, fungicide, insecticide, and those fumes being in your face. We put a big emphasis on safety, and if you're not willing to invest in the safety, I would tell you you're not willing to do this correctly, because that's the first and foremost part of everything. Liability. One of the frustrations I had when we saw the savings was, I can't believe we've been paying so much for all these years. I mean, all they're doing is standing there and mixing it and giving us a recommendation. Well, then I stepped back and I thought about it. They had labor, they had infrastructure, and it's something that we thought about, we explored. We're very intentional about how we mix chemistries, but it is a reality of moving into this type of arena. Experience, you lose experience because while your retailer may have dealt with 10 different growers, 10 different scenarios, 10 different situations, you now have one situation, one experience. And so there's a lot you lose out of that. And so there's a lot of times you have to become self-taught. You need to educate yourself, push the limits, learn, ask questions, find out who you can talk to, and get advice from. The other side, we saw this on the pricing and sourcing slide. We had to become inventory managers, billing, invoicing, tracking every load that goes out, every gallon that's applied, every pound that's mixed. And that is not without its challenges. And there's times where you want to save $1, but you're better off buying 100 gallons more of one product so it's easy and it's fast. And so it's not as simple as, hey, I'm going to save 40% on my chemistry bill, because there's a lot more to it. When we added the chemistry facility, and all we did was repurpose an old shed, we also added our UAN storage to the mix as well. And so that was all done at one time and probably has been the best thing we could have done because life is simple. We mix hot loads, whether it's nitrogen or chemical, in one spot. It's all recorded. We've spent a lot of time doing it, and it's saved and made us a lot of money, but it is not without its challenges. So the third area that I thought was important to discuss today about part of our transition home was, not just try to find ways to save money and be more profitable. While important, we also wanted to establish kind of where we wanted to be in 5 to 10 years, but also how we wanted to get there. And so in I think it was February pre-COVID, we sat down, Mom, Dad, Heather, and I, and went through a true strategic planning, identified our strengths and weaknesses, some areas we thought we could grow, improve on the business, as well as things that were going to challenge us. And one of the things, it wasn't just growth in the terms of acres and dollars, while important, but also how do we want to get there and truly embracing that the regenerative ag mindset and leaving the farm in a better situation than when we received the farm. And we don't want to just say that and be cliche when we do. We really wanted to practice it. Hence why you see us taking on more of our nitrogen applications, using nitrogen where it needs to be and how it needs to be applied, is also when it needs to be applied. Buying flexibility and having those, I guess, that regenerative mindset and really practicing those 4 R's. And we're not all the way there yet, but we are truly looking to make the land better. And I think that's a part of our vision. But also, how do we get the farm to a point in 5 to 10 years where, my share of the business is greater? How do we make sure that if Gerald wants to retire, we have a plan in place? Make sure that we have enough acres to continue to buy on the scale that we want, and continue a set level of, or a measurable level of profitability. And through this, we had a lot of things, a lot of good discussions, some joking, some things that, we set out goals for 2020. One was improve our drying facility and grain system. That doesn't necessarily accomplish anything 5 to 10 years from now, but it was a big step into improving profitability, improving efficiencies, and making sure that we can operate and get things done timely. One challenge we have had is measuring, defining measurable metrics that we can use to see how well we are doing. Are we growing at the rate we need to be? Are we profitable at the level that we need to be to make improvements, whether that be in a grain facility, chemistry infrastructure, equipment upgrades, you name it. And probably one of the biggest challenges that I see in our immediate term is follow through and creating a level of accountability, because it's Mom and Dad, it's your wife, it's I get to it. I'll do it next time. I'm home this weekend. I'll do it then. And that's been a challenge. COVID threw its own challenges in this whole thing. But I think it also needs to be as simple as, did we meet again? When we meet again, did we get those little things done? Did we clean the junk pile up? Because if you can't accomplish that task, how do you expect to accomplish the tasks of 5-10% growth annually? And I think those are things that we are working on, that we are going to have to hold ourselves accountable for and really improve upon, because it's a mindset shift. We're not just Mom, Dad, Heather, and I. We are Thompson Family Farm, the business. And I think that is the mindset, and the biggest hurdle that we are going to have to overcome is how do we shift from being a family farm to a farm business? And I know that sounds overused, but it's a reality. I mean, the last 5 years we've had great growth. We've had opportunities to add, rent new farms, move in and find margins where there weren't really any more dollars available for. And I think that's important. The other is really, I as I look at my transition home, it comes back to having a good support system. You got to have a vision of where you want to go, but you got to have the support to get there. Because I'm pretty sure we would have better vacations and probably a little nicer house if we didn't buy farms, if I wasn't buying planters and tile plows and fixing drainage on the weekends. And so, as you look back at the timeline, the support started back in 2015 with a family member enabling us, as I'll say, helping us get that first farm bought. We had further assistance when Gerald didn't ask if I wanted to farm. He said, I assume you've negotiated the rent on those new farms, right? really gave me authority and support through this process of taking on more of the management role. We had additional support when we had family sell us another farm and allow us to take over their operation. And then really it comes back to the home support because, that's been a big part of it. I went from a pretty comfortable salary and benefits to, the farm's going to pay me something. I don't know if it'll be monthly, if it'll be quarterly, if I just soon get one check. If you don't really have to pay me, I'm having too much fun. So let's and so you got to balance that family lifestyle and family living. And probably one of the biggest things, and I wrote this in one of my early notes, it's not on my current one, is I think that's an important part of this because my wife comes from a family farm. Her parents did the work for her grandmother, but also had off-farm jobs. And so that dependency, that lifestyle of being on the farm, she had a different experience than I did. And I think it's important as you move from a non-farm full-time position to a full-time farmer is you got to bring money home. There needs to be a contribution back more than once a year, whether that's in terms of a regular salary or not. I think it's important to show that the business is paying me for my time away. And that's a very difficult thing to do and something we're still working on. But again, without that support structure of extended family and my spouse in this case, this process would not be able to happen. We wouldn't have been able to invest in the business like we have. Because if you're investing in this business, that usually means two things. One, you're away from home more. And two, you've taken money possibly that could have been returned to family living. And that's a challenge I think younger folks are going to face because we don't necessarily prioritize the farm as our life like my father or grandfathers did. We prioritize as millennials more about time at home, trips, living in the now type of mindsets. And I think that's important to have everybody bought in if you truly want to make this transition work. And so that's kind of where I flew through some of it. There's a lot of details we could have went into as far as numbers and how much money we saved and when and why. And but the big thing is, as I'll wrap this up, is the few pieces of advice is find ways to get a better price and find ways to buy things that are outside the norm. Because if you want to make room for yourself, you got to find room in that finite amount of dollars. As you look at the margins that we've continued to fight, not necessarily what we're seeing as we go into 21, but as we've seen from the end of 2018 to the early 2020 timeframe, you got to find margins where there are none. And what does that mean? Maybe that's wholesale chemistry. Maybe that's custom work. Maybe that's buying fuel in bulk as opposed to buying it 1,000 gallons at a time. You got to explore and find ways beyond what's traditional. And the final thing is set a plan, set a vision. Where do you want to go? How do you want to get there? And then make sure there's people and everybody's on board, because without a good support system, it just won't work. And nobody will be happy. And that's kind of where I'll leave it. And so as we conclude here, the last slide has my phone number, my email, our farm's Facebook page on there. Feel free to reach out in any way. I'm happy to kind of talk through my experience, my transition, as well as some of the other projects that we've had ongoing. Like I said, there was a lot of details I didn't get into, but could elaborate more and further if you would like to reach out.